All right, let's dive into Simpler here. This is a pretty awesome device that I use all the time. It's like the Ableton sampler, but simpler in some ways, but in other ways, it's also got more features. So I don't know if I'm going to talk about the difference between the two of them, but I'm basically just going to focus on Simpler here. Let me just give you a quick rundown of what all the different knobs and whatnot do. So we'll take this kind of from like a complete beginner, never look at Simpler, and then I'm going to show you some really cool tricks and things you can do with it. When you load Simpler up, it's going to look like this. We have 3 different modes of sample playback. We got classic mode, which, let me just find a sample to play here. Let's do, like, I don't know, drum loop. Oop, drum loop. Hello, ego loop. Let's find out. Yeah, whatever. We'll throw in one of the bass loops that I made here. So on classic mode, how this works is if you have a file playing here like this, or if you have a sample playing back, it's so loud, and then you were to change the pitch, like let's go down an octave, it's going to play through the file twice as slow. Right? See here on the octave up, it goes all the way over to here, but if I take it the octave back down again, it only makes it halfway. That's like a classic sampler mode, right? So basically, you gotta think of it like this. If I just grab this loop and toss it in here, here's where it's normally playing, like that. But if I come down here and I press shift arrow down to take this down an octave, do you notice how everything became twice as long? That's because in order to lower the frequency, you need to stretch the waveform out. Like a slower waveform is going to indicate a lower frequency. And if it's twice as slow, then that will give you an octave. If I go down again, then that's twice as slow again from where it currently was, and then twice as slow again from where that is. All right, so that's how a traditional sampler works, is by playing back through the file more slowly, and that way it will lower the pitch. The inverse is true as well. If I were to take this 1 octave up, it would play through the file much more quickly. So that is classic mode. And in classic mode, you can also do things like have loop turned on, right? If I wanted to just loop a little section of this, maybe just loop this little bit right here. But you can hear that kind of starts to affect pitch a little bit sometimes. Yeah. So that's classic mode, where you can have like a looping sampler going on. Let's turn loop off for right now and pull this back. I'll dive into what a lot of these are soon. Then we have one-shot mode. So in one-shot mode, basically it's going to, no matter how short this is, oh, we have it on gate mode. Let's put on trigger. You see how on one-shot mode, when you're in trigger, it's going to play the entire file, no matter how short your MIDI note is. This can be really helpful for drum samples. Like, let's say you have a kick drum or a snare. Let's do a snare. All right. Now, let's say you have a snare, and you just have these little tiny MIDI clips like that. Now, obviously, in most situations, you're going to want the snare to play all the way through. So if you have this on classic mode, let's make it even shorter. There we go. So now it's a really, really short little bit. You can hear how it's cutting the end of the sample off. But in one shot, no matter how short the MIDI note, it's going to play all the way through. Unless it's in gate mode, in which case it'll work pretty similarly to how the classic mode works. So yeah, one shot, typically pretty good for drum samples. Then we have slice mode. Now, I'm actually going to go back to a hello ego beat. Yeah, let's do this one. So in slice mode, how it works, and this is like one of the most powerful features of Sampler, I think, is basically it will slice your file up and allow you to use the different notes to play it back. So if we have, oh man, I cannot wait for Live 12 when you can see this and see the instruments all at once. That's gonna be great. But we're not quite there yet. We're on the cusp of it. It'll be here soon. Anyway, when I have this set at, I think it starts on C1. Notice that on C1, it's only playing back this one first little note, pitch, whatever. But if I go up to C sharp, that's going to play the next one. And so on like that. Right? You can hear how, oops, let me undo that. Hear how you can kind of hear the click of the next one starting. You get that little click. You can actually adjust where these are by moving this. And now there's no click at the end. This is when you have this set to detect the slice by transient mode. You can also set this to just beat, in which case it will just assign, a division based on whatever you have this set to. So here you can go ahead and let's just make a little random sequence of notes here. You can see how it's playing back through all the various different parts. And if I were to adjust where this was at by taking it up an octave. So that's a pretty cool way to get an interesting little rhythmic aspect or a melody and something that sounds a bit different. You can also add a fade in and a fade out to get rid of those pops and clicks. So that's pretty cool. You can also set this to divide up by region. All right, like if you want to just have a certain number of regions regardless of beat or rhythm, you can just set that here. You can have up to 64. Then you can also have set by manual, where you actually go in and manually add where you want your little sections to be, which I honestly can't say I use it all that often. Prefer to have it made just for me. But it can be pretty cool. All right, then we also have a couple different options here in slice mode. There's gate and trigger. Gate works the same as before, where it will only play for as long as the MIDI note is being held down. So if I take all of that, let's actually switch this back to like beat. Right, you can hear how the notes are clipped off, whereas if it's in trigger mode, it'll play all the way through the little section that it's playing. So that's the difference there. There's also mono or poly playback. And there's also through right there, where through basically like playback will continue through the slices. All right, if you're holding it down, it'll start in that slice, but it'll also continue into the next slice until you let off the note. Okay, so that's the basics of the three modes. All right. Let's dive into some of the other aspects of this here, and I can probably talk about more of this in depth. Down here we have the filter section. This is the same as any Ableton filter. Let me put this in slice mode, put it back to transient, and give myself a... Okay, that's a pretty cool rhythm. And let's just use the filter. Right, so we got our filter, nothing different about that. We have the different filter modes here. You can do a band pass, right? Morph, where it'll morph into different types of filters. This is probably easier to see over on the other screen here. There's our same filter. This is like an expanded view of the filter. We want to set it to morph. We can see that as I morph through it, it morphs into different types of filters like that. All right. We also have the different types of filters. This is like a model, an analog model, and it adds a drive element to it. So if we have this set to OSR, now we can We can kind of drive it like that, which is pretty nasty. We also have a filter envelope in here, where basically you can think of an envelope as like an invisible hand that turns the filter frequency up and down. All right, so we can have our envelope set to pluck. Let's just keep it a pluck like this. The attack of 0 milliseconds, a decay of 600 milliseconds, sustain of 0, release of 50, which isn't going to matter. It's going to sustain down anyway. Let's go back. We kind of turn the amount up, and let's go back to the frequency and turn the frequency down. So now do you hear how this filter is plucking each time? Sorry for the interruption. We'll get right back to the tutorial in just a moment. I just want to take a second to say, if you like this content and you want more tutorials like this, I have a Patreon over here. And you can see I have monthly tutorial videos like this one you're watching right now, as well as monthly sample packs. I offer track review and private lessons right here. You can also go to abletonprivatelessons.com and you can book a session directly with me through that. And if you see on my online scheduler that there is a time available, just go ahead and book it. These are always open. I always keep this up to date no matter how long ago I made this video. I guarantee you that if you see a time slot available there, you can book it and we will have a session. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly. Otherwise, let's get right back to the video. And that's all based on this right here. I can turn this inverse, and now instead of opening and then closing, right? So this is the open and then close. It's going to close down, then open back up again. And actually pretty cool. Yep, anyway, that's the filter section. We can turn this on and off by clicking this button right here. You can also switch between 12 and 24 decibels per octave. This is a steeper filter cut, so it's going to cut more above or below or around the filter cutoff point. 24 decibels per octave, and this is a 12 decibel per octave cutoff right there. Also, we have a velocity percentage, right? So if you want the velocity to have an effect on the filter, let's go ahead and turn the envelope off. We'll set this amount to 0. That means that there's 0 application of the envelope to the filter frequency. So now we should just hear it's not moving around at all. But if we turn the velocity up, now the velocity of these notes is going to have an effect on it. And I can actually come over here and randomize the velocity. So you can see all the notes that have the higher velocity are having the filter open up more. Let's turn that down. And you also have key right here. So key tracking will basically allow you to, I don't know why it's not active right now. Weird. Huh. Interesting, yeah. Not really sure why key tracking is inactive. However, what key tracking does is it will basically use the keys to determine where the filter frequency is cutting off at. So as the keys go up, the filter frequency rises like that, and as you play lower notes, it'll follow it like that. This section in the middle is the modulation section. So this is like an LFO. Like if I wanted to apply this LFO to that filter frequency, I turn the filter up. And we can go ahead and hear it now, like opening and closing based on the rate of the LFO, which I change using this right here. Right? We can also apply this LFO to the pitch. Hear the pitch of the sound going up and down. We can also apply it to the volume. I don't really hear it doing much of the volume though, for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why. What if we turn off retrigger? Nope. Well, anyway, what retrigger does is basically on every new MIDI note, this will start to retrigger a new sequence. Ah, there we go. It was just retrigger. So every MIDI note was having this like go through its cycle and start like that. Bam, 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 bam. And it wasn't really allowing it to get all the way down to the totally closed off stage. Now you can hear the volume rising and falling. Let's try and apply it to the filter too. You can get some pretty cool sounds by having it unsynced and just free running, so it's not being re-triggered. All right. Next, we have pan. You can also have it set to pan. So now it's going to go left and right in either ear. Yeah, much crazier when you have retrigger turned off. Here we have offset. So basically, this will just roll the LFO and make the LFO start in a different part in its phase, a different part in its cycle. You can also turn on attack, which will fade the LFO in, so you can maybe have it go like and get stronger like that over time. And then we have another key tracking mode right here, where the LFO, well, basically the rate of the LFO is influenced by how high or how low you're playing. Turn the LFO off like this. You can change the type of waveform down here like this. You can switch it between hertz or synced, right? So hertz is just a free running based on 3.181 hertz, which is like cycles per second. And then we have also synced mode, which it'll sync to the project tempo. Moving on, over here we have the envelope section. So as I mentioned earlier, what an envelope is basically like an invisible hand controlling a parameter. That it has an attack phase, a decay phase, a sustain phase, and a release phase. So the attack happens over a certain amount of time, like in this case 126 milliseconds. The decay happens over a certain amount of time, in this case 600 milliseconds. So this is the attack, this is the decay. The sustain is a percentage, all right? So there's no time here, because basically what happens is it goes 128 milliseconds from here to there, 600 milliseconds from here to here, and here it holds down until the note lets up, all right? So this just stays there until you press note up, release the note, and then it enters the release stage where it goes from the sustain down to 0, and how long it takes depends on this setting right here. This is our pitch envelope, all right? So the pitch envelope is going to change the pitch with each hit. So I'm actually going to apply a little bit of this here. And I'm going to turn the decay time down a bit so it decays faster. Let's turn this up higher to make it very drastic. So here now we have that kind of like lasery sound in the beginning. That's because the pitch is starting high and falling low very quickly. All right, next we have the amplitude envelope. So if I can turn the pitch envelope on or off. If you are in any mode besides slice mode, oh, that's why key's not working, because we're still in slice mode. So obviously these notes right here aren't playing a pitch. These notes are playing back different parts of the sample. However, if I were to switch over into classic mode, now we can come over here and have the key actually adjusting the filter. And let me set this to play. I kind of want these longer, so I'm just going to like pull these out like that. Kind of low. Bring it. Also a lame little line. There we go. So now these notes are actually having an effect, and I can come over here to the amplitude envelope, which is going to have an attack, decay, sustain, release phase now. Before it did not, and it didn't have an option for the amplitude envelope because we were in the different trigger mode. We were in slice mode, which only has a fade in and a fade out. There's no other stages here. So now we can actually come in here and use this envelope to change the amplitude shape for each note. See how I'm having it fade in over 90 milliseconds and it's removing that sharp attack? I can also change how long the decay is. And then by turning sustain up, we're going to hear a little bit of it for continually as it holds. But just not as much as if it was turned all the way up. Release, like I said before, that's just how long it takes for it to go from release all the way down. We also have all these modes here, and I feel like looping envelopes are one of those things that are just so useful. So I'm going to use a looping envelope mode, and basically what happens is it's going to go through its cycle once, then go through it again. So this is going to be easier to hear if this was slower. Let's go ahead and loop this and times two just to make it much longer. So now we're actually going to hear this looping envelope do something. Hear it looping right there. I don't know why it's not sounding. Why is it not working? There we go. It's getting a loop going now. Let's set this to beats mode, and this will be synced now with the project tempo. So you can get some pretty cool tones and timbres by having looping envelopes going. There's a bunch of different modes in here. I'm not going to go into them because it's kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about, but definitely think you should explore this. All right, that basically covers everything on this panel right here. I mean, this is pretty similar to like a bunch of the other Ableton devices. They all have the same parameters on it. So if you know about what's going on here, you should be able to use most of the other Ableton parameters as well. One thing I did not really talk too much about was the parameters that are happening right here. So let's just go through this really quickly. Here's the gain of the sample, right? So if you want the sample to be louder, you can turn it up or turn it down there. Here's your starting point. So this basically just determines where in the sample, and this is a loop starting point, by the way, too. But like, I can change the starting point right here, but by dragging this arrow, or I can change it right here. Next we have the length, right? So if you turn the length down, then it won't play all the way through. It'll be like, you see it stops right there with the end of the yellow section. You can adjust the start and the stop to really focus in on like the areas that you want. So let's say we want to focus in right there. Turn the length down. And as you move this around, you'll see that this little length of time remains. So you can actually do some pretty cool granulatory type stuff with this. Like let's just go ahead and get rid of all of these. I'm going to play one sustained note here. And I'm going to have the amplitude envelope set to loop. Beats mode. Why aren't you looping? Oh, right, because it's playing through the whole thing like that. And then it's just done. But if I turn on loop, There we go. I can get rid of the looping now, like that. So we can actually use this to scrub through it. So now I turned loop on, and loop, what it's going to be doing is saying loop 100% of this region right here that we're starting at. So you can actually turn this down. You can see it starts right here where the yellow is, but it's only going to loop this a little bit. And when I turn it down to 0, the reason why, you can see how it's kind of moving, like jumping around here. The reason for that is I have snap turned on. And what snap does is it tries to find the 0 crossing point, the closest 0 crossing point it can, to avoid a click. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to turn snap off. And now you can see that I can just like smoothly move through it. So we can actually use simpler as like an interesting almost like a granulator of some sort, right? It's pretty cool. Let's put an OTT saturator to make it a little louder. You know, the attack can help get rid of some of those clicks. Yeah, that's pretty cool right there. I like that. So yeah, that's what that is. And fade will fade. I add a crossfade to the loop. That way you can maybe fade the sections together and make the loop less abrupt. It kind of smooths out the transitions. See how it kind of softens the edge? That can like be thought of as kind of like your grain window as far as granulators go. Next, again, I talked about loop and snap. We got what that is. So we have the voices, right? This is basically the same as any synthesizer. You can play up to 6 notes simultaneously, and you can up to 32 or just 1, which is a monophonic sound, right? So I'm going to go ahead and return all of this to normal, just like it was. Let's turn off loop. And now I'll talk about warp. So I don't need to talk about warp modes too much. There's probably other videos that can tell you about that. But the cool thing about sampler is it allows you to turn on warping. So now, instead of, remember at the beginning of the video I was talking about how when you play higher notes it plays back faster, when you play lower notes it plays back slower. That negates it. Now we add time stretching and pitch shifting into the situation here. And I can come back and play these. And I can actually turn this up. I can like have it go up an octave, let's say. And you hear how it plays back at the same time instead of playing back twice as fast? If I didn't have warping turned on, it would play back like this. Same deal with taking it lower. If I didn't have it on, it'd play like this. So warping is really powerful. Now you can also come in here and stretch it way out. Like I'm gonna turn this on texture mode, and I'm gonna warp it. I'm just gonna press this ×2 button. So this is really stretching it very, very long. And now I can like get all weird and granular with it. I can also maybe up an octave. Yeah, pretty cool. Or divide it down really fast. Right, because I have flux turned up here, so each time it's a little bit different. The flux is like a randomization to the grains it's playing back. That's pretty cool. Ooh, I really like that a lot, actually. Just do that over and over again. That's pretty dope. Very strange, cool sound design stuff you can get going on with here. So, I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things you can do with this. I've just shown you a few of them here, but I don't want to make this video too long. So, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and cut it right there. But hopefully you found this little deep dive into Ableton Simpler to be helpful and useful and inspirational to you. If you like this content and you want more tutorials like this, I have a Patreon over here. You can see I have monthly tutorial videos like this one you're watching right now, as well as monthly sample packs. I offer track review and private lessons right here. You can also go to abletonprivatelessons.com and you can book a session directly with me through that. And if you see on my online scheduler that there is a time available, just go ahead and book it. These are always open. I always keep this up to date no matter how long ago I made this video. I guarantee you that if you see a time slot available there, you can book it and we will have a session. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out directly. Otherwise, let's get right back to the video.